that next weekend that I was nearly hit by a pickup truck.
Holy cow.
On a country road while doing a long weekend Saturday run. All right.
So before we get into all the great racing, we got James Sharf. James has been on the podcast. And then we got, man, I'm terrible. You told me to lure up before we started your name.
Edward Wimmer.
Wimmer. And you guys are riding partners. But before we get into all that, let's talk about where we're located and where you work. We're in the parking lot of this place.
Yeah, so we are in none other than Covington, Kentucky. If you are trying to picture that on a map, and you can picture Cincinnati, Ohio, we are right across the river, sister city from downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. I like to call it the correct side of the river, or the bourbon side of the river. But yeah, very northern part of Kentucky, across the river from Cincinnati, Ohio. We are in the parking lot of Road ID, world headquarters. Road ID is a company my father and I founded all the way back in 1999.
Wow. So let's talk more about that. Since it what is Road ID and where is it gone from where it started?
So Road ID at its base level is wearable ID that communicates who you are, who to contact, and how to access medical information in an emergency. So medical and contact information in an emergency. So the genesis goes all the way back to when I was training for a marathon my senior year of college. And that story, and I'll try to make this pretty quick. James is over here smiling because he's heard the story a few times. But I was a college soccer player, finishing up my last year of collegiate soccer. Knew I wasn't going to be taking soccer to the next level, so I was trying to figure out, like, what's next? What do I do with this fitness that I have right now? What do I do next in my athletic endeavors in life? And it was about that time some buddies of mine that were on the cross-country team were going through the same process. Like, cross-country's over, what's next? And those guys decided to run a marathon, and I said, well, that's on the life goals list, so let's do that. So threw my hat in the ring, started training for a marathon, and because I was an amazing son to my amazing parents, I would make the obligatory calls home to the folks once every couple of weeks. Like, a lot of us have been there before. Like, parents worry about us. They wonder what's going on. So we call them from time to time. So I was 21 years of age training for this marathon, made one of those phone calls to my dad, told him about marathon training, told him about all the long runs on country roads on the weekends. And he had a concern that sprung up rather immediately on that call. He's, after he got done questioning me about my sanity as it related to running a marathon, he started asking about the safety related things, like what would happen if I had an accident? How would he, as my father, be notified? So his was a concern for me. He wanted to know that if I had been in an accident, he wanted a phone call so that he could help in the response to that. At 21, I just thought he was being an overprotective father. So I dismissed his concern, like a lot of us tend to do with our parents' advice, and went about marathon training. And it was literally that next weekend that I was nearly hit by a pickup truck.
Holy cow.
On a country road while doing a long weekend Saturday run. And, I recall looking at that pickup truck off in the distance and thinking, surely it sees me. I'm following all the rules. I'm running on the correct side of the road. I'm facing traffic. I see this truck. It's coming towards me. I'm thinking, certainly it sees me. It gets closer. I'm thinking, certainly it sees me. It's getting closer. And I realize this guy doesn't see me. So to avoid being clobbered by that truck, I jump off the road, end up in a ditch. And from that ditch, I like to say I had two very scary realizations. One, which is the genesis of the company, or the second half of the genesis. I'll say the first half was my father's concern saying, hey, like, what if you had an accident? How would I be notified? You need to take some form of ID with you so that I could be called. That was the first half. The second half was me staying in that ditch going, hey, my dad might be right. Like, I could be fighting for my life in a local hospital and nobody would know who I was, who to contact, how to access medical information. And that freaked me out. Because as a runner, much like most of us do in cycling now, we go out with minimal stuff. And that minimal stuff doesn't often include any way to identify you. So the second scary realization from that ditch was that for the first time in 21 years, I might have to admit my dad was right about something. And so that was terrifying. But we coupled his advice with that near miss, and a few months later in his basement here, just a few miles from where we're sitting right now, broke as a joke. Like, we had no money, but we had 2 credit cards, and said, let's see what we can do about solving this problem. And I won't fill in all the gaps, but the importance of what we're doing really hit home the first testimonial that we got. It was a young man's father reached out to us, and we're still in my dad's basement trying to make this thing work. And his son was hit by a car while cross-country training. And because of his road ID, they were able to get to the hospital and be with their son in an appropriate amount of time. Otherwise, this son would have been laying in the hospital for some unknown amount of time before his parents would start saying, well, I wonder where Brian is. So they were able to get there quickly. They were very thankful that their son had the ID. He had some pretty serious injuries, so they were thankful they could be part of the treatment. And I remember this guy calling and telling us this story, and my jaw was on the ground because everything that we were working for was just validated. And not only was it validated, but it gave us the motivation to keep going. So starting a business isn't easy. There are especially when you have very little startup capital to work with, there were some meager times. We never really questioned whether or not what we were doing was going to work, and we never really questioned whether or not it was worthwhile. But hearing that first testimonial gave us all the energy that we needed to keep pursuing this idea, this company. And it's interesting to report now, some 20 years later, it's nearly every day somebody's reaching out to us saying, thank God for my road ID. And those range in scope from a runner tripping over a curb, knocking themselves unconscious, and when EMS shows up, all they have to do is hold up their ID, and it does all the talking for them, tells them who they are and who to contact, to people that say they wouldn't be alive today without it. We've expanded, and parents are buying for their children's, and we're hearing stories about families being reunited at Disney when a child wanders away. We're also hearing stories that are really hard to talk about. A story I'll relay from time to time and get choked up telling people about is a mom that posted on her Facebook page, and she shared with us this very touching story about her son and how he was wearing it when he got hit by a car. And because of it, she was able to get to the hospital in enough time to hold her son's hand and tell him she loved him one last time. So I've taken up a lot of time to tell kind of the story of Road ID and kind of, where how we started in the basement and where we are today. We've come a long way. We hear these testimonial stories, as I mentioned, every day, but we still feel like we've got a long way to go. There are so many people, runners, cyclists, triathletes, that still need to hear this story about how important this thing is when you go out and train and race and compete. Something needs to be able to speak for you if you ever find yourself in a situation where you can't, and Road ID can be that thing that has your back.
All right, hold on one second.
I think James is getting ready to chime in.
All right, so we're back.
Story.
You were about to say something, James?
I've already forgotten. I'm old.
I just want to say what is it that's on your hand or arm, I should say, that notices people?
Yeah, so road IDs are pretty basic in this land of Uber technology that we're working in. Road ID is a fairly analog device, so it's something you wear on your wrist. You can attach it to your existing wearable. So if you're wearing an Apple Watch or a Garmin or Fitbit or something like that. We also have necklace versions and shoe versions the information is pretty straightforward. It's your name, it's where you are located in the world. So like for me, I put Kentucky, Lakeside Park, Kentucky, USA on there, and then I have a couple of good emergency contact phone numbers. For me, that's my wife, my sister, and my mom. For somebody else, that might be you would pick the people that you most want to come to your aid in an emergency. So that varies from person to person. And if you have something that the doctors need to know about when they're treating you, you put that on there too. So if you got an allergy or you're taking a specific medication, you definitely want to put that on there. Now that's the basic version. You can also add on a an online personal health record that you can access from information on the ID. And so what by that I mean, in the cloud, you can securely store lots of additional information than what I just relayed, and that can be accessible to first responders by having them go to a website or call a phone number and keying in a serial and PIN number that is engraved on the backside of our IDs. So it can be as simple as a few lines of information on ID. It can be as advanced as connecting to a cloud personal health record.
Nice. Has it ever changed anything from the start till now? Has it always been what it is? Is there any, I'm saying like from the, I guess you want to say the prototype to now, is there anything that's really changed about it?
Yeah, so we've been doing this for over 20 years now, and our very first ID was something that looked a lot like a military dog tag. So we took the military dog tag, being the most recognized form of ID in the world, and we made something that was kind of a step up from that. It looked nicer, more kind of jewelry quality, you might say. But then we quickly learned from our customers, and as a company, as a business, that's one thing that we think we do a really good job of, is paying attention to the customer and evolving everything we do based upon the feedback that our customers are sharing with us. So we very quickly heard from people that they don't like wearing anything around their neck. Yeah, that makes sense. So where would you like to wear it? Well, some runners would say would prefer for something for my shoe. Other people said I want something on my wrist. As wearables, fitness devices became more and more popular. We kept hearing from people, I would like something I could put on my Garmin or on my Fitbit or on my Apple Watch. So a lot of our product innovation comes from listening to our customers and finding out what they want, how they want to wear this potentially life-saving product. So the basis of what we do, though, hasn't changed since day one. It's information on an ID that can come to your aid in an emergency. So we like to say, our why or our purpose for existing is pretty straightforward. Road ID is on this planet to save lives, provide peace of mind, and fuel adventure. And we do that by improving the outcomes of accidents and emergencies. Our product is a wearable ID and now technology, and I can explain that in a second, that will connect you to those most important when it matters most. And so the technology piece of it is we're getting ready to roll out. Actually, you can go to the app stores right now and find it on iOS or Android. It's an app called the Road ID app. Its core features is eCrumbs, which allows you to go out for a run, a bike ride, a walk. I mean, you could be taking the dog for a walk if you want, and it allows you to send an SMS to your emergency contacts. We call them guardians. Send an SMS to your guardians and say, hey, Justin's headed out for a bike ride, and then it allows them to live track you on a map. Oh, yeah. So if a significant other wanted to check in and see how you're doing, they could open up they could click the link that was sent to them via text, and they could see where you are on a map. They could see how far you've gone, how fast you've gone. If maybe you were doing an out and back road ride, they could get a gauge of how long it might be before you return home. But the most important feature of the app is an accident sensing piece of it. So if it senses that you've had an accident, it can alert those same guardians that you've had an accident via text message or via email and say, hey, Justin's had an accident, and oh, by the way, he's right here. So that gives them the opportunity to pick up the phone, give you a call, see if you answer, make sure everything's okay. If you don't answer, it gives them perhaps the information they need to dispatch local authorities or go try to find you themselves.
Yeah, I know a couple guys that ride with no phone, mountain bike. I'm like, yeah, I understand there's a group of us right now, but that's like just a bad habit to get into and all around.
Yeah.
So they're always like, grab your phone. It's like, where's yours? I don't know. That's just something I look for, more of a safety thing, not for like we're on the trail, let's take pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean and one of the things we talk about all the time, I spend most of my bike rides out with people I know. So James here knows my wife's phone number, but he may not know he certainly doesn't know my medical history and things like that. So I'll find myself on large group rides where I know a bunch of people and they know my phone number, but they don't have any idea who they would would need to call in an accident. And that's where Road ID can come in handy. I think sometimes we fall into this false sense of security because we're with people we know. And that's great, but oftentimes those people don't know what they need to know if there is an accident on the trail or out on the road somewhere.
Yeah.
And I can attest with riding for Ed now for 2+ years and racing with him for about a year, the sheer volume of impacts that he has with the ground, there's a high need in his, from personal experience, for him to have this. And the E-crumbs is something that comes in very handy.
Are you saying I crash a lot?
I am saying that, Edward, and I'm also saying I think the other reason E-crumbs is there is so our spouses know how late we're going to be when we say we're going to be out on a 4-hour ride and it ends up being 5.5. I think that tends to come in handy.
I'm pretty sure they know our 4-hour rides actually mean 5, maybe 5 plus.
Yeah. Well, when we say we're going to do 80 and we end up doing 100, there is that portion.
Do me a favor, bring that mic like underneath you.
Underneath me.
Yeah. There, perfect.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah. All right. So,
Dialed.
I just hit the spot.
You nailed it.
Nailed it.
so you were running at first. When did you get into the cycling part of the aspect?
Running was an interesting transition to go from soccer to running, because prior to training for that marathon, I hated running. Like, running was the punishment that I needed to do to my body in order to be prepared to perform at soccer well. Getting into running, my friends on the cross country team said, "Hey man, like, not everything has to be at 100%. So slow down a little bit, and you'll enjoy this more." Which is, through that advice of figuring out that I could slow down a little bit, run further, I really, kind of fell in love with running for a while. And after college, into the start of our company, I still played soccer recreationally, and I transitioned from the marathon to shorter events, 5Ks, 10Ks, things like that. But I just kept hearing from our customer base early on about how great cycling was. And, I had ridden a bike like everybody that grew up in my generation. I had my Diamondback Silver Streak and would take it out in the woods and get rad on it. But
Mag wheels?
no mag wheels. Too poor for those. But we. I love being in the woods riding bikes, and then I start hearing from all of our customers that are using our product for cycling. And back in the early days, I was on the phone taking customer service calls, so that provided an opportunity to have some discourse with people that were doing this. And there was just this allure to it that I had to figure out. So I bought my first road bike, which was a Fuji Provence, and so that had a carbon fork, carbon seat stays. And the year after I bought it, they turned it into a women-specific bike. So I felt really good about it.
Makes a lot of sense, actually.
But that eventually started racing that thing, and by the time I started racing it, that bike had a triple chain ring. I think it was Campy's Centaur group set on it, and it was well past its prime by the time I realized that there was a racing scene locally.
Yeah.
So I took the competitive side of my makeup and tried my hand at racing, and I said, I'm going to race this, what then was pretty well outdated. I'm going to race this thing until I get on the podium, and that's going to be what I'll use to justify buying a new bike. So that's what we did. I started racing road bikes and went from Cat 5 to Cat 2 over a couple of years, and then had my second kid and realized how hard racing Cat 2, maintaining fitness for Cat 2 was. Took some time off the bike, picked up some LBs, and then eventually this gentleman here convinced me to try to find fitness and a love of the bike again. And man, am I glad I did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy, you can easily fault when you stop riding how easy you can, not everybody, I'm not saying everybody, but you can just drop off fast, and you're like, whoa. And then like when you go riding, you're like, man, I used to be so fit, and then now I put on pounds, and how fast you can drop off, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we are right now. We just finished the second leg of the Epic series of bike races. So that includes the Swiss Epic, the Cape Epic, and the Pioneer. And came off the Cape Epic with a good degree of fitness. And that's actually a fear right now, is like, how do we not drop that off? Because we do have some races we want to perform pretty well at next year, don't we, James?
I couldn't have said any better. I mean, coming off that thing I can't speak for you, and I won't this time. With what I think was the best shape of my life, and coming home like so overconfident that I could do anything physically when it comes to cardio. And then I captured the unfriendly bug and followed up with pneumonia and like panicked.
Yeah.
Like, how far did I fall? And I've been back on the trainer for a week, and today I actually kind of felt normal. I'm gonna go ride 50 tomorrow, but you get this level of fitness, and you selfishly think, I don't ever want to lose this. It becomes an anxiety almost because you take it for granted because it's fun.
Yeah.
And when you feel fast and when you look fast and you feel good, you just want to maintain that. And then you and I talk about how do we get 1, 2, 5, 10% better, which was a conversation he and I had earlier today, which ironically it's been a month tomorrow since we finished this race. And this is the only second time I've seen Ed. I usually see Ed a couple times a week. We usually talk feels like every day, but maybe we've only talked 3 or 4 times since this race, which feels so weird. It feels so foreign when you live together for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we were in a, you were just mentioning this earlier, we spent 8 days in a camper van, not much bigger than this, in South Africa, going from town to town to do that race. And it was funny. You just get used to it. It almost feels like, well, this is how we live life now. We're going to be in this van every day, and we'll use the showers that are in the race village and the portalettes outside, and this is just life now. And I think we both kind of we had a phone call not too long after it where we were like, "Do you kind of miss being in a camper van?" We're like, "Yeah, that was pretty rad." I mean, you don't get to. That's a for most people, that's a never in life experience.
Yeah.
For some, for a lucky few, it's a once in a lifetime experience to race your bike for 8 days in a row and to enjoy the crap out of it. I mean, man, I think we're just truly lucky, blessed that we got to share that experience.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's just, I'm going to sound corny in saying this, and I said it to my wife the other day. I'm like, I missed being in the camper van with Ed. I missed the pain of racing together every day. And I've had multiple partners over the years with this in these events. And, I can't imagine doing something like this without Ed now that we've done 3 of these together. But you almost can finish each other's sentences. I mean, we were making food for each other and coffee for each other in the mornings and kind of making fun of each other. And you just get to know each other really well. And Ed probably has a few stories that he'll share about knowing each other almost too well. But, yeah, I mean, it's just, you do this thing together, and it's really together.
Yeah.
And, you and I have talked about this before, and the other 3 partners I had, which, by the way, I talked to multiple times during the week. Mike Thompson's become friends with, our acquaintances now with Ed. We've ridden together. He's from Louisville. We did the Swiss Epic together. But Ben Chan and Dr. Medlicott, he and I almost every day are chatting on WhatsApp and Signal. And they're in New Zealand and Australia. And you build these bonds because you did this hard thing together, and you did it together because you can't do it without one another.
I will say that James is, one of those unique individuals that works really hard at maintaining relationships with people. So, he's had the, as he just noted, and I noticed this about him as we began to become more acquainted. But he does, like what he's talking about with these partners that he's had for these other races. He is in regular communication with them, either via text message or phone call. So it's probably not without a little bit of effort, but these, doing these types of events together as a partner's race, and maybe we need to explain that for the audience.
Yeah.
As a partner's race is it will either bring you together or tear you apart. And I think, James has been lucky enough with his four different partners that it's brought them together and built lifelong bonds. But there are definitely instances where it could go the other way. Like you could totally end up not jiving with your partner. And
we've seen it.
Yeah, we saw it firsthand. We've seen partnerships explode. We saw one at the Cape Epic where I don't know, James, some sort of clairvoyant, but he pointed at these 2 guys and said, they're not going to make it. Like their partnership won't last this event. And it was the next day that one of them pulled out of the race.
Wow. That's crazy.
You just see it and how they're communicating with each other. And I'm not going to make it sound like Ed and I are perfect partners. Ed is,
I mean,
but I'm not. So I want to beat him too.
well, that's
But you got to work at it. It's like a mini marriage, and Ed and I have strong personalities, both of us, and it's about giving, leaning into the other person's personality continually, and supporting each other's weaknesses from the get-go, because every day we had a different challenge, and I think lesser teams would have been crushed by those challenges. And every race that we've had, it hasn't gone easy. Where the 3 previous races I had one flat in 19 days of racing. We've had more than one flat in a day before.
Wow.
We've had mechanicals that would crush most teams, and we've just calmly worked through it. Maybe
talk about your wheel issue, because that I was really impressed by that. That you were able to fix it, but it happened four times? 4 times in one day, and probably cost us
20 minutes.
Yeah,
Easy.
easy.
So we had a day at stage 2, and we were going pretty good. I mean, you know what it's like when you're feeling good and you're going good.
Yeah.
Stage 1, we went great.
I'm more of a downhill enduro guy, but yeah, I get you.
Well, we're going to change that over time, Justin.
I know.
We're going to get you doing.
I do have a hardtail here I need to take back with me.
There you go.
I like the downhills too.
Yeah.
But we were 45K into a 90-some K day, and all of a sudden I'm going downhill, and I don't have a drivetrain. It freewheels both ways.
Wow.
So, we have these DT Swiss 180 hubs on these amazingly light wheels, and Specialized does a great job with their product, with their Revolve product. So, figure out that this isn't going to work for the next 45K. And we don't know how long. We chose not to put our sticker on our frame that day, which was a tactical decision that we made.
Mentally safe decision.
Yeah, it was a mind game thing we were playing with ourselves. So we didn't know how far it was to the next aid stop to get mechanical support.
And for perspective, this was a 96K day, so almost 60 miles, 2,100 meters of climbing.
So 7,000 feet.
About 7,000 feet. And we're
on the Land Rover technical terrain.
Yeah.
Dead center.
And
going downhill, dead center in the middle of the day. So
we didn't know it at the time, but we were 10K from an aid stop.
Yeah. And we were going good. I mean, I think we were at the back of the we started in the D group that day. We were getting in the back of the C group, which is where we ended up racing the rest of the week, which really doesn't mean anything, but they start the pros, then the A group, then the ladies pros, the UCI ladies pros, and the B, C, D, all the way down through J. And we started. We had a flat in the prologue, which I don't know how Edward did it, but he had Cushcore in. By the way, Cushcore was the stage sponsor for us for the prologue, because Cushcore works.
Yeah.
It allowed him to finish the day and
On a flat tire.
And we were going good that day. In that last section, we finished dead last in our group because of how slow he had ride with that. But that versus changing out.
Let's get back to your wheel.
The wheel. So anyways, the wheel pulled off the rear wheel. DT, the cassette comes off with the free hub, and that's for service reasons. You should be able to rebuild it, which we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the tools that I had were a little limited. Specialized has a really small tool that goes under your bottle cage or in your swap box, and we're using that. I didn't have a flat head to be able to get in under the ratchet, so I had to use my 2.5 mil to pop this thing out. And what had happened is the ratchet had frozen inside the free hub, so the spring wouldn't pop it out. So fix that.
And so for the listeners, viewers that are technically savvy, bike mechanically savvy, you know what James is saying. As the non-mechanical partner, I don't even know, he's speaking a foreign language at the moment.
Yeah.
And I am just very thankful that he's on the side of the trail trying to figure out this wheel issue, because if it were up to me, we'd probably still be on the side of that trail.
Yeah, I was banging the thing on a rock to try to get it to pop out, because I didn't have the right tool to get in there, and I was struggling to find something to get in there. But anyways, we popped it loose, cleaned it out, put the spring back in, hopped on, had a drivetrain for another 10K. Gave out again. popped off, fixed it. It was frustrating the first time because I didn't know what the solution was. But that's the takeaway I think that Ed's wanting me to get at is you need to be solutions oriented with this. You need to stay calm. I was a little frustrated when I was banging the thing on the rock, trying to get to pop loose. But that happened a total of 4 times. And we got down to about 2 minutes. He would hold the bike, pop the skewer off, pop the wheel, pop the cassette off, get the 2.5 mil under there, get the finger on, clean it out, spring back in, pop it back on. But at one point in time, it was only lasting 5K.
Wow.
Or 6K. And this was a known issue that I guess DT had, and they ended up replacing the part. But that cost us probably 20, 25 minutes that day.
Yeah.
And we weren't overly frustrated about it. We kept our stuff together. If anything, it built our partnership. We came across the finish line and realized, hey, that was quite the experience. But we did it together. And we had a challenging day. And, you know, the camaraderie of the village, they took my wheel. Somebody replaced my wheel, who later in the week helped us again. They gave me a brand new wheel. And
wow.
Was it 2 pounds heavier? Sure. But it allowed me to ride the next 2 days. And, you know, made you appreciate the camaraderie of mountain biking. And, you know, Ed and I did get that down to about 2 minutes from that 10 to 12 the first time. And it was a team effort that allowed us to do that. And the camaraderie of the people riding by us are like, oh, man, you guys are having a rough day. Because we would pass these people. We'll come back and pass us again.
I'm like, oh, your wheel's off again. That's not good.
There's this big guy, Renz, this South African guy that we became buddies with. He and was it Brian?
Michael.
Michael and Renz. I mean, they commented every time.
Yeah.
Oh, guys.
Yeah. Sorry, mate.
Yeah. But, you know, that was a good learning experience. And that was, you know, one of many mechanicals we had during the week. And we've been blessed not to have a lot of those in the past. So how do you work through that? And, you know, you look at the time and...
I think there's 2 good takeaways from like our mechanical stories, and one you just mentioned, which is like you got to be solutions oriented, because we've had some weird stuff happen. That was one. Back in the Swiss Epic, my saddle rails broke, and you know, for the rails on the saddle broke.
Titanium rails.
And I ride this. What saddle do I ride? What's the name of it? It's the.
Sell some Marco or sell.
It's a Cell saddle, split saddle, and. Yeah, the right rail went first, which made the saddle really squishy. And I went, uh-oh, this isn't good. And we had just left an aid station.
Yeah, without a mechanical stop.
Yeah, no mechanic there.
We didn't know that.
And then the left rail went. And so the saddle that I ride has this really steep nose to it, like it points down pretty sharp. And when you lose, and I have it slammed all the way back on the saddle clamp. So when the rail broke, what's left for me to sit on is this really narrow, super pointy end of the saddle, which, as you can imagine, not really comfortable.
But was really funny to look at.
So, not to make the story longer than it needs to be, you know, we went back. We actually turned around, went back to the aid station that we had just exited to hoping there was a mechanic there. There wasn't. Our only move to make at that point was turn around and keep riding. And I was picturing a point where for the next probably 10 to 15K, I was going to be spending the bulk of my time standing. And so that was getting ready to mess with me mentally. Like, I've never done anything like that before. What's this going to do to my body? I'm going to be wrecked before the end of this stage. Tomorrow is going to be even worse because of this, you know, using these muscle groups that I'm not accustomed to using for this long a period of time. And then it just hit me. Well, what if I just slide the saddle a little bit forward on the clamp? Then maybe I can clamp the broken rails in the saddle clamp. We'll see if that works. And hopped off the bike.
Perfect solution.
James grabbed the tool, got it all, got it loosened up and dialed in, and away we went. So solutions focused would be, that's point number 1. Point number 2 would be somebody on your team's got to be a mechanic. And that's not me. It's definitely James. He had it all figured out. But if you have if on these partners races, if both of you are mechanically ignorant, then and something like his wheel issue happens, like it's over. You're walking.
Do you think there's teams like that?
Oh yeah,
unfortunately there are. I mean, we have a group joining us in the Swiss Epic next year. Right now there's 4 teams going, and one of them, I don't think they could change a light bulb, let alone a tire. And I say that kind of jokingly. I've known both these guys forever, So we are going to spend the next 10 months with them, or 9 months, working on some basics. And, from plugging a tire, which we got down to under 2 minutes, to, changing a tire, fixing a chain, just basic stuff. Nothing overly complicated. And we've had some overly complicated things happen to us. But that's part of the challenge of racing. And we would add up these minutes. But we've talked about it, I think, very honestly. We would rather have the hour or 45 minutes that it cost us at the Cape Epic and not finish 4 or 5 places higher and have the stories and finish where we did, because it's a better memory. It's a better experience. Yeah. And we're not winning. I mean, I think we were competitive for being a couple middle-aged dads, but those memories.
Who have jobs and life.
Needy wives. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You remember the hard days, though, right?
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, stage
That's a
one,
great
do you
point.
remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's prologue. I remember the prologue probably had the most technical section, so it's memorable because it had the most technical section of the entire race. But yeah, it's an amazing point that I've actually never thought about before. That you remember the hard days.
Yeah. That's like that's on anything, right? Like even like people that I work with on my normal job, say, "Oh, that's gonna be terrible," and I'm like, "Okay, but you're gonna remember this, and you're gonna learn from this." If it was just an easy breezy day, you almost kind of, in a bad term, you almost kind of turn to mush brain because nothing ever changes for you.
Growth doesn't happen when it's easy.
Yeah.
On anything in life.
We talk about that all the time. I mean, if this was easy, we probably wouldn't do it.
Right.
I mean, we do it because it's hard.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be easy. And how do you make it harder? You go faster.
Yeah.
I mean,
never gets easier.
You only get faster.
Did you guys have, like, were you top 20, top 10, where you wanted to be at all?
I'm going to let Ed speak to that because I think it's more special coming from him.
Well, I don't think we never really talked about where we wanted to finish. Like, we would, ethereally talk about it from time to time about, where do you think we could finish? And for me, I mean, hell, I didn't start riding a mountain bike until 2 years ago. So yeah, I had no idea what to expect when doing these big stage races. So to me, like, finishing was great. I'm also super competitive, so I was like, well, we got to be in the top half. Is the top third doable? No idea. Because again, hadn't been there before. Talked to James about it a little bit, and he's always approaches things pretty practically. Like, why don't we just go out and do what we can do and race? The race within the race will be against ourselves. And but we did. We had at the Cape Epic. We finished 20th in our age group, and we hovered anywhere between 35. I think coming out of the prologue, we were 35th in our age group with the flat tire, and I think that gave us some inkling that we could probably finish in the top 25. But really worked hard to get that top 20. There was some fun. The last couple of days were fun because we realized that people were racing us. And when we realized they were racing us, we didn't have any choice but to race back. So the race within the race, as a guy that we met there, South African named Sean, said, there's a hornet's nest of people that are trying to finish in the top 100 overall, and we were right there. So 20th in our age group, we finished 101st overall. But there was definitely a hornet's nest of people that were all trying to get that top 100, and we didn't really notice it until the last few days because we were racing ourselves. We were just trying to go as hard as we could go, and what we were doing throughout each stage is we would look at whoever was in front of us, and we'd say, all right, they're next. We're going to pass them, and we both read a book recently. David Goggins' book. What's the name of it? Can't Hurt Me.
So good.
And
He's the best. Love David Goggins.
He talks about, quote unquote, taking souls. And so when you pass somebody and never look back, like, that's taking a soul. So we kind of use that as motivation throughout the day, not racing anybody in particular for the overall or even within our age group, but just looking at racing as hard as we could race and thinking about who's next up the trail that we were going to try to pass.
Yeah, I think we focused on being the best us we could be. And Ed, I don't know if that's more competitive or differently competitive than I am, but in the last couple of years, I focused on trying to make other people stronger and myself go along with them and be the best that
Yeah.
I can be and never compare myself to somebody else. But by stage 6, when there are teams that are obviously gunning for you, 5, 6, and 7, there were some obvious people that were coming after us that made you be a little more competitive, and it changes the focus a little bit. But I think we always focused on what we could do and the best we could be, and we had our best result as a team. I think we were really well prepared, and even with all the mechanicals and the stuff that we've talked about that we can get better at as a team, where we can pick up a couple hours in the future. We're not focused on anybody else, but us and what we can do. And I think that's a really healthy way to look at it, because in using other people as motivation, in a way you're kind of tearing them down. And if you focus on building yourself up, it's a lot more fun. And I've seen the journey that this guy's gone through, losing 30 plus pounds, becoming an amazing descender, and a few little things we need to work through together as teammates, but we're both open to that. And we're always focused on that 1%. We do an after-action review every stage race and beat each other up in a positive way. We've done this almost every week since the race. We did it after the Swiss. How can we get better? How can we get better? Which is fun.
Yeah, and that's, this is how we approach it. There are lots of ways to approach this race. I mean, it's, there are people that are trying to win, so they probably think about it differently than we think about it. We're trying to do the best we can do. There are other people that just want to finish. We met another set of Americans and
the Texans, inspirational dudes,
and they weren't really ready for it, I don't think. I mean, but what they had was a never give up mindset, and they were going to go out there and they were going to finish every day. And it didn't, as long as they made the time cut, I think was their perspective. And they were riding a different race than we were. But I guarantee you they had just as much fun as we did, too.
Yeah, and one of them pulled the other across the finish line because he ended up having the same free wheel problem I had.
Oh,
had the
really?
same wheels. And there was about 150 pair that had that bad anodizing on them. And, bless DT, they fixed that problem. But to see those guys pulling each other across the line, and I saw them multiple days come across the line with only 15 minutes to spare or 20 minutes to spare before the time cutoff, because there is a time cutoff at the Swiss. But you just saw that their bond was strong, and they weren't too excited. They had their gig. And then there's another group of Americans from a central part of the country, which I won't identify, that were so ungrateful to be there that it was almost embarrassing. And I'm looking around like, you're in this beautiful place with all these people riding bikes. How can you be unhappy?
Big privilege to be there.
It's a privilege. I mean, it's not a right. And so many like-minded people. Ironically, the Texans and I were not like-minded, but we really enjoyed each other a lot. And they were so positive. They helped us out with running advice. They were just so giving of their time. And they were giving to each other. And you saw how they finished the race, which is one guy pulling another guy with a stick, it looked like, or a chain.
That was a stick.
And that's inspirational. The guy that carried his bike across because he had a wheel that couldn't be ridden. Those are the inspirational stories. Those are the people that finish 2, 3, 4 hours behind us, that have that much less time to recover and have, a few less resources because of that reduced amount of time. It's not the guys winning, the people up front.
Yeah.
You expect them to do well, right? Us finishing, 20th in our category, which felt really racy and without a few things, we would have been 15, 16, which for us is like winning. It's like being on the podium because the top 10, 12 teams are pros, or former pros. To see these guys come across, and it's kind of like, midnight at Kona?
Yeah.
The last 15, 20 minutes before the whistle blows, seeing those teams come across, I would do it almost every day, was inspirational because they're putting it all out there every minute, and then they have less time to recover. And they're starting earlier too. They're starting a little bit later, but they maybe get another 45 minutes of sleep, but they're 4 hours in deficit, and sometimes they're showering and getting ready and eating dinner immediately.
Wow.
They don't get any recovery.
Speaking of recovery, I was going to transition there in a minute anyway. Did you guys run the same diet? Were you guys different? What'd you learn from that?
maybe James should take this. But before we talk about nutrition, would it make sense to explain this stage racing, this epic series, how it's a partners event, what that means?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and why don't you take that, James? You've done
So-
well. I'll tee this up, and James probably wouldn't tell you this himself, but he is the only American, and by American I don't mean U.S. citizen. I mean North American, South American. He's the only American that has completed all three of the epic races: Swiss Epic, Cape Epic, and the Pioneer. So Swiss Epic obviously in Switzerland, Cape Epic in South Africa, and the Pioneer in New Zealand. Only American that's done all three. When you do all three, you get this this designation that the event gives out called Epic Legend. So if you do all three, you become an Epic Legend, special designation or status within the event. There's a couple of other unique designations they give out if you do a certain number of events over a period of time. But that's, the Epic series of events, partner races, only one Epic Legend in America. That's none other than the James Sharf that's going to tell us now a little bit more about these events and how they operate.
Well, that's a whole nother story, which Justin and I have talked about before, but that's why I'm pulling you along, so you can be number two. Be kind of cool to have us both 4 blocks away from each other. But the global Epic Mountain Bike Series, there's another Epic Series here in the U.S., but the global Epic Mountain Bike Series was really started 18 years ago, if you count years, not number of races, in Africa with the Cape Epic. And Kevin Vermaak started this and matriculated into what it is today, Cape Epic being the Tour de France of mountain biking. The best in the world are there, Nino Schurter, Lars Forster, Henri Avancini. I mean, the best, the marathon world champion was there this year. The world champion from last year, UCI cross country, Jordan Sarut, he and his partner, Matt Beers from South Africa, won this year. So you have these high level people. I mentioned Bert Brenchens earlier, that he's won Grand Masters for the last however many years. Annika Longvad won 5 of these. So you're with these bike celebrities at the Cape Epic, and the same thing at the Swiss. It's really competitive. So the format is partner teams start together, finish together every day. No more than 2 minutes apart. First time you're 2 minutes apart, it's a 1 hour time penalty. Second time, it's another hour. Third time, you're disqualified. What does that do? Somebody asked me the other day, why does that make sense? Why would you do that? It forces you to work together. If there's a stronger or weaker partner,
Yeah.
you have to work together. And that's about being selfless. So it goes back to our team mentality of focusing on us and being the best we can be. It's the same thing with a partnership. You have to be selfless, and you ebb and flow through that. And you can see the teams that aren't, that don't have the communication. We call it every turn, every bump, every gear change, and it kind of helps us. But the partner event humbles you. It forces you to focus on team. There's weology and there's meology. Everything we do is about we. We've ridden the same bikes. You have to have the same kit. And it just forces you to think differently. It changes your life.
Yeah.
Because in my day job, we're a we. I think I entered this series at a perfect time, because that's what we were going through at work. My wife's that way. But this series forces you, I've had 4 different partners, to lean in other people's relation or personalities. I have a strong one, and I can be verbose. I had to give up a lot of my personality over the last 2 years, and it's been really good for me. And that's been the fun thing about Ed. We complement each other. We're very similar in so many different ways, it's almost scary. But we're just different enough in the areas where we can help each other out, and I respect him a lot as a human and as an athlete. And he has a great story about how we met and how I allegedly conned him into becoming my partner. But, again,
That's true, by the way.
We're 47 and 44. I can't imagine doing this with anybody else. And I actually sheepishly asked him about a race that we're doing in April. Do you want to do it solo as a partner? Our partnership. But that's the Epic Series, and there's all these mini Epic Series races throughout the world. There's a new one, Croatia, called 4 Islands. There's one in Wales, Andorra, 3 in Australia, and we're hoping to bring a couple here to the U.S. next year and the following year and the year after that. So, to be determined, announcement hopefully pending in the next 60 days that we're bringing something to the U.S. And Ed and I are part of that because of our love for the series. We're doing the Swiss next year. We did the Swiss this year with Levi Leipheimer, world tour phenomenon, whose partner was, Lee off the sofa.
Yeah.
And that dynamic was crazy to see UCI champion and a guy, 2 hours behind him working together. Great story too. And, Levi's going to do that next year. And then hopefully the Cape with us in 23 because we're going back. We have some unfinished business, better experience. And Ed, needs to go get his Pioneer medal in 23 so he can become an epic legend as well. But we hope to be able to do that with Levi too.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Jeremiah Bishop. And, create this little American enclave of people that have done this to grow cycling in a different way. Because single day events are great, but stage racing, for those that have the means and the time to do it, I think it does change your life. And I don't mean that to be dramatic, but it has impacted mine. I'm in better shape. I think differently, I eat differently, I sleep differently. And I think that's just going to give me another 10 or 15 years with my kids.
Yeah.
So Ed, losing 30-some pounds in 2 years. Going from, I like to say, from the sofa to St. Moritz or from the sofa to Ceres, because that's where we started in Africa, is real. I mean, he's a different person from those pictures from 2 years ago. And it's fun to be part of that. A small part of it. He did the work. But it's really fun to see somebody do the work.
Yeah.
And I get more joy out of that.
You talked a bit about the different people we've been exposed to riding this. You talked about Levi Leipheimer and his partner Lee, who's another friend, again, World Tour athlete, been on the podium in the Tour de France, won just about every stage race
Tour
you
of
can.
Switzerland.
Yeah, Pro
Tour
Tours.
California.
And then just a regular guy. And all the different nationalities that you come in contact with, and all the different backgrounds and belief systems that you come into contact with doing these races. And you'll just come into contact with them. Like some of these people you're building relationships with because you're around for 5 days in the case of the Swiss or 8 days in the case of the Cape Epic, and you get to know them a little bit. And it's really cool to see how people that look different and sound different and come from different places and have different political beliefs or religious beliefs or beliefs across the board that are different, how you share this common experience, and everybody's there for similar reasons, but everybody's there because they love riding their bicycle, and there's that common ground that exists, and you could sit down with anybody at any one of these events and have provided you speak the same language, have a meaningful conversation about life and about the bike and about their journey and what they're passionate about, and all the other BS of life is left behind.
Yeah.
Like, we showed up to the Swiss Epic. We got there a few days early. We pre-rode the course, and the Icelanders showed up.
38 of them from Iceland. That's like
And I
10% of the population.
Exactly. I hadn't seen these guys in 22 months since the Pioneer. And Yoey, it was like I'd seen him yesterday. I mean, he showed up, and he and Magnus, they saw me, we hugged, and all of a sudden we had 38 friends from Iceland. And a lot of them are going to come over and do BC bike race next year. And it's just like you talk about, what am I going to see again? What's the next event? I mean, their families came in, and they couldn't wait to introduce us to their wives and their kids when they come across the finish line. I mean, it wasn't, hey, when you coming to Iceland to visit us? You have the invitation. You have no excuse. You're coming. Tell your wife.
Yeah.
You're coming to visit us. And I don't know how many of those relationships have come out of this, like being accurate and counting them, but Katie, who runs the Epic Series, has become a friend. Mike Flynn, who we had dinner with after the Cape Epic, and Gareth, we were able to go to dinner with these people, put this thing together after the event, and I had a blast listening to these guys' stories. And we went with our mechanic and his wife, and
Yeah, the bond you even form with, like you were saying, Donnie, our mechanic, and Stephanie and her crew, the folks
Sue's team.
The Sue's team. They also drove the camper around for us. Like, Yeah, if
she
you open
cried when she dropped us off at the hotel. So Stephanie Sawyer, who's taking care of me twice, making sure my legs work, she and her team, she drove the camper van from village to village for us, and we didn't know that they were going to be cooking too and doing some cleaning and all these things that came with it. And after the race, we went back to the hotel. She dropped us off in the camper van, and there were tears. And you spend a week with somebody, and her husband and I have stayed in contact too. It's just like we haven't seen each other in 2 years, and it feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
So you have these bonds through cycling, and that's part of your partnership too. Donnie, our mechanic, who had a tough time with our bikes and got us through. Stephanie working on our legs, and
I'm laughing over here because James rode, what stage was it without a rear brake?
Stage 5.
Stage 5.
5. 6.
So let me
5.
let me look this up for you real quick. Stage 5, just for some perspective, was an 84K day, 2,900 meters of climbing.
It's 10,000 feet.
Which, when you climb 10,000 feet,
You have to go down 10,000.
well, you go down. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, you go down 10,000 feet with no rear brake.
Well, that's not quite fair. It was 84 kilometers. I rode 79 without a rear brake. So I don't want it to be more dramatic than it was, but it was 5K when the rear brake went.
Now imagine, like, put yourself in the position
I'd be done.
of having to go descend 10,000 feet of, it's a cross-country race, so we're not talking like super technical enduro stuff. But imagine, like, at the beginning of it, a few K in, having to go, I don't have a rear brake, and then just dealing with it. Like, you just overcome it and move forward. To this day, I hope that never happens to me, and I don't know how James did it, but did it.
One pedal stroke at a time, and there's no way I was going to quit on my partner.
Yeah, we both take the mentality. Yeah, we'll crawl across that finish line if we have to. We're gonna get there.
Pulling each other if need be.
I want to talk about, like you mentioned, community. I moved to Bentonville, and the bike community there is strong, and there's other places for sure. But like, I just met bonds with people who are like out of town. I see them on their phone looking for trails. I'm like, hey, want me to show you around? What? I was like, yeah, I'll just show you around. And like, that's a bond. I've had people like, hey, I'm gonna be back in town. You want to ride? Hey, or just guys who are like, hey, I just moved here. Hey, me too. Let's ride. And then stuff like that. So, yeah, the community's strong. Mountain biking in general.
I would say definitely, having started on the road side and transitioned to the mountain bike side, I'm going to give some credit to the mountain biking community for being certainly more welcoming than the road side. I think, I consider myself a roadie too. And as one, I think the roadie community has a lot of work to do to become a more welcoming community of people. Great people after you break through the hard shell exterior and the gotta earn your stripes elitism, but there's some work to do on the road side of things to become more welcoming, to have that experience like you just shared in Bentonville.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree, and I think these events do that because it's everyone from the top to the bottom. You do a single day event. The TSC that we did earlier this year.
That's the Transylvania Epic.
Transylvania Epic. I mean, we completely overlooked how hard that was going to be. It was only 150 miles. We were laughing about it versus 450 for Africa. Those were hard days.
Oh, man, they were brutal.
The rocks and the terrain. 30 miles in Pisgah is a lot different than 30 miles in DuPont. And that's the same thing with TSC.
Yeah, no doubt.
Credit to PA and their mountain biking, but it really opened our eyes up. And our original scope on this was BC Bike Race 20, Swiss Epic, Cape Epic. We did it opposite. We did hard technical stuff, and then the second hardest with the Swiss, and then the Cape being the least. He was able to fly down hills, which wouldn't have done had it been reversed.
The technical stuff in Pennsylvania, as hard as that, like, just baby head rocks, which is a term I've learned since becoming a mountain biker, just everywhere, and having to pick through those and hit those with speed and navigate. Yeah, really set up, made the rest of the stuff look or feel easy.
But you did it, and it's just one pedal stroke at a time, and everyone does this one pedal stroke at a time. I mean, how do you get more fit?
Yeah.
One step at a time. You put a little bit less in your mouth. You cut out drinking, and everyone makes these different sacrifices in doing these events, but it comes into recovery. You mentioned recovery earlier. At the TSC, he didn't do recovery for the first couple days, and then we got him in the boots, and we got him on the pills, and the mystery pills would be it's all hammer stuff.
Yeah.
Let's clarify. Mystery pills means something Hammer Nutrition was putting out.
We're not.
But it is amazing the trust you build with a partnership, because he would just hand me these Hammer Nutrition pills, and down the hatch.
And this is stuff to clear lactic acid. But we have Normatec recovery boots.
Mm-hmm.
We did not take them to Africa with us because our team over there had the boots already, and we do massage. We have an R8 roll recovery R8. That thing's amazing. Theragun, amazing. Thanks, Lee. The massage. If you're going to perform at a certain level, can you do it without it? Sure. But if you're not clearing the lactic acid, if you're not keeping the muscles fresh and soft and pliable and preventing that fascia from sticking to muscle, you're at a disadvantage, because all the top people are doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the difference between, I bet it's 10, 15 minutes a day for us and having that recovery and being able to do all those different things. Stretching. So 4 things that Ed does now that he did not do 6 months ago. Stretch, boots, massage, and recovery supplements. And the transformation, I think, speaks for itself, because the results are there.
Yeah, the first day at Swiss, I had an on the bike full leg cramp. Both the hammy and the quad went, and luckily was able to pedal through it, but came off the bike for a while to try to let that muscle spasm stop. Eventually got on, pedaled through it, cost some time, and certainly probably favored that leg for a while. But after getting recovery sorted out and doing all the things that James talked about, I haven't cramped since.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to knock on wood. But
And there's a lot of handing of pills, lactate,
Mystery pills,
clear, electrolyte, drinking the right stuff. I still think we have room for improvement in that area. I think it's an area where there's some separation between us and the better teams. But being able to clear that acid and not get up to that point, because we do something called negative pacing, which Ed can speak to. Again, we're middle-aged dudes with kids and full-time jobs. And I think we're punching kind of above our weight to some extent. At least we did, I think, at the Swiss and in Africa. But there's still room for improvement. And Jeremiah likes to say, our coach, Jeremiah Bishop and Mike Schultz, fighting for 1 or 2% is where they are. We're not far behind them. If we can sort out mechanicals and stuff like that and share that with other people, you're going to have mechanicals. You're going to have frustration. Everyone has that, issues and challenges. It's how you deal with them. And more importantly, how you deal with each other. Because when you see people yelling at each other, Ed got excited once in Switzerland. I did the right thing and I shut the F up and didn't say anything because it wasn't going to help.
when he says I got excited, I crashed hard, and I was pissed about it.
Yeah.
And so I think, one of the things that we do a pretty good job of is stay even keeled throughout the entire experience. We try not to get too worked up about any one hurdle or any situation, or even get too excited about anything that's happening. But I crashed, and I was not happy with myself. And James is usually a really talkative, in my ear all the time, being supportive type of partner. And after I crashed and was visibly pissed, nothing, just crickets. And that's just knowing your partner. He knew I didn't need it. There was nothing. If he had said anything at that point,
it was going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, that's happened to me. I was at somewhere, and it just a bad day on the bike, and I was like, man, I'm just going down. And then my buddies were like, I started just walking the bike, so I felt like I was crashing on these rock gardens. So they're like, you gonna keep riding? I was like, nope. They're like, all right, no more.
They got it.
Yeah.
It's just about knowing each other. And people out on the trail. when somebody's shoulders are slumping, I don't know how many people I would come up behind and just give them a little push, you know, or words of encouragement, you know, because again, we're not on the podium out there. We're doing the best we can.
That's a good point. The just encouraging other racers that are out there that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And people crash, checking on them, making sure they're okay. Like, it is okay to lose 5 or 10 minutes or 15 or 20 or an hour in a day if you're helping somebody that needs your help.
Yeah.
So it's, like, unless you are fighting for that top podium, it's far more important to be a gentleman out there than it is to be a racer.
I'm laughing right now because in the prologue, we're going. And these guys are yelling, bomb, bomb, bomb at us, which I had no idea. And he finally, shows me a CO2. So I pulled the CO2 out of my swap box, threw it at him so they could get on the trail again, right? 15 minutes later, Ed has a flat. And I'm like, hey, where's your CO2? And he didn't put one in his swap box. So I'd given away our only CO2 cartridge, and somebody ended up giving us one. But, sometimes you have unintended consequences of being kind, too. But I think it came back and paid us tenfold throughout the race. And you see these random acts of kindness constantly. And it goes to life. If you see somebody being an a-hole out there, I mean, that has a ripple effect too. But if you see somebody being kind and getting a door for somebody or helping somebody out with something, I encourage people to do that, because during these mountain bike races, we constantly saw it. A tube, a wrench, people asking, you okay? And you get the thumbs up. So, and I'm not perfect with that either, but I think most people want to help somebody out. And I think given the opportunity to do the right thing versus the wrong thing, it's what you do when nobody's looking that really counts. And on that trail, when you're alone, nobody's looking. I mean, can you throw the person a bomb? Can you hand them a lever? Can you give them your tool? Ed likes to just drop tools off his bike anyway, so people end up being able to use them. But, that's another strong thing about the community, which you see in the road cycling side. But there is that elitist side. So road cyclists, get your shit together, because you can be nicer, you can do better. Maybe not.
Sport depends on it.
Yeah, maybe not learning from mountain bikers, but maybe observe just random acts of kindness and bring them into your life.
So, those races are big, like elevation, descending, all that's elevation. So someone might think, listen to this, like, but you live in the Cincinnati area. So how does that go? You knew this was coming. So how do you guys train for something like that?
I'm going to leave that to Ed too, because he's got that down to a T now.
Well, it's so our mountain biking, our trail system around here is impressive for what we're working with. But we also have terrible soil. So if it rains, trails are closed for a couple days. Mm. So we have good trails. We don't have a lot of mileage. And then we also have Midwestern weather, so it's going to rain sporadically throughout the training season, and you're not going to be able to spend a lot of time on the trails. So most of our training is done on the road,
or the trainer,
So
we both have Wahoo kicker bikes. So.
Wahoo kicker, Zwift, usually riding a prescribed workout from our coaches. So our coaches will upload rides into Training Peaks inside of Zwift. You can do that prescribed workout using normalized power. So if they're saying to ride a 5-minute interval at 270 watts, like, the bike just makes you pedal 270 watts. So
there's no cheating.
I actually really grew to love the kicker bike and the Zwift prescribed Training Peaks synced workouts, because you can do other things while you're on that bike. You can listen to a podcast like this one, or you can listen to a book. If you want to, you can zone out and look at the Zwift screen, which I tend to never do. But to answer your question, lots of time on the road bike, outdoors. A decent amount of time on the trainer in the basement.
A lot of hit training, high intensity interval training. Edward created a workout here he calls 10 hills, and let's call it 50 miles and 5,000 feet of climbing.
Wow!
You do that twice, it's pretty brutal. Neither of us has done it twice, by the way. But you do that ride and you go as hard as you can. It's pretty intense, and those 10 hills, simulate some of these punchy climbs in Africa. What they don't do is simulate Switzerland. So what we did, we were fortunate enough, we went out to Utah. Ed was out there for just under a week, and I was out there for 2 weeks, acclimating to altitude and getting those long, brutal climbs. Because they have uphill only, climbing only trails at Park City. And we did that back to back to back to back, which I think helped us a little bit with altitude. I mean,
Sure.
a little bit, maybe less for you, but helped me a ton. And then those long climbs, getting some of those in. And the punchy ones, there's something called Puke Hill there. Every hill in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Every hill in Switzerland is Puke Hill. And we would yell at each other, you know, and this is kind of corny, but, you know, David Goggins, thanks, buddy. Can't hurt me. We would yell this stuff at each other while we're going up it. And we would talk about taking souls. And, you know, I'm a little more vocal than Ed is out there. But I don't mind yelling words of encouragement at him and reminding him that nothing can hurt him. Because that's the mentality. Your body gives up well before your mind does.
Yep.
And if you can't hurt your mind, therefore you really can't hurt your body. Your body's crushed a lot of those days. And when we wake up the next morning, your mind is like, oh, I'm fine. I got this. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta figure it out. So, you know, those Swiss Epic days, as James were mentioned, brutal. And very few people are lucky enough to train in a region where they can simulate some of that stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, I met a guy once that trained a lot in Kansas, and their version of hills were going out and riding the headwinds. So you got to figure it out. Bike trainer, headwinds. For us, it's 10 6-minute climbs. Those is what I call them around here in northern Kentucky, Cincinnati. We have lots of hills, but they're 6 minutes of effort. And so you string as many of those together as you can in a shorter period of time as you can, and simulate to the best of your ability.
You guys need to come out and ride this trail I just rode. For me, it's awful. It's called Here's Johnny, and we end up riding with this guy named Chris, and he's actually done the BC bike race.
Nice.
And he's actually been
Best week on a bike, by the way.
he's actually been a great what do you want to call it, motivator to like push me. You got this, like on a jump or anything like that. But we rode this trail, and we kind of found out we rode it backwards, and
Done that before.
but it's all. I mean, I'm talking like, I'll say 90% just rock, and just like not like a big smooth slab. I'm talking just like rocks and everything. It's like, this is brutal. Yeah.
We still got to get you out to BC Bike Race.
I know.
Monira will listen to this eventually when she's not mad at me, which seems like every other week. But they just did, they just had their event, and they had 3 events.
And Monira
used to be the race relations director for BC Bike Race. She's become a really good friend of mine and like an empath for Ed. But they did their gravel race, BC Bike Race, in Okanagan, Penticton, central Okanagan, central BC. And they did their e-bike race, all in a compressed month. So for a lot of organizations, that's a year.
Yeah.
We did all that in a month. And then next year, they're hopefully going to have 4 events. And we're trying to work our schedules out to make sure that we're in BC for the September event next year. But it's just a lot of single track. And the cool thing about Africa this year, compared to 2 years ago, because I did the largest Cape Epic ever, which was 690 people in 19. This was the smallest one ever at 290 teams. So 690 teams, 290 teams of people. And there's so much single track this year. Every day I would say, wow, that's the best trails I've ever ridden in Africa. And the next day. And the next day. And it was awesome.
A little minor PSA here for South Africa. It's a long way to go. 30 hours of travel to get there. And, I think as Westerners, most of us just don't know all that much about Africa in general, South Africa maybe specifically. And so I didn't know, I hadn't thought about it much, been so busy with work and family and everything else and training that I had done zero research about where I was even going. Spent very little time looking at, stage maps, looked at them to know, okay, 2,900 meters, that's a lot.
Really, that's about all the research he did.
That's about the extent of my research, and was just really blown away by everything that South Africa has to offer. Now, like most places, politically it's complicated, racially it's complicated, but the people by and large could not have been more generous, more gracious, more welcoming, more concerned about whether we as visitors to their country were enjoying ourselves.
They did not take anything for granted about our presence.
Yeah, no, and it just made us feel like part of the family. Like South Africans, the racers from South Africa, the people working in hospitality, the random folks that you would run into at a bike shop or at a coffee shop were all just so welcoming and so eager to talk and tell us more.
At the Woolly tent.
Yeah.
Eldred, she was amazing. Took us in, invited us back. You know, she owns a vineyard over there, and here she is working in the Woolies tent. And what
volunteering.
Woolworths in South Africa is still a thing, and it's a grocery store. And they provide the food in the hospitality tent. And she's handing out these meals, and she became a buddy. And we had some pretty cool kits, we'll say extreme kits. We did get voted best dressed, which was not our intent. But that, by the way, that category did not exist until we got there.
Apparently, there's an
award on the way.
Award for best dress coming to us.
Reach out to Mike Flynn on that, but here she is. She has a big job, and she's here volunteering
for 8 days.
9 for the day before too. Taking 2 weeks out of her life, pretty much, to be part of this event. 2,500 total people were there. Of that, 600 of us were racers. The rest are volunteers, crew, there to make sure we have the best experience.
Dang.
And that was amazing, and they're all making us feel so welcome in their country, like Ed said.
Then you add on to just that welcoming nature, the beauty of it, the geography and the beauty of it is like nothing I've seen before. Now, if you were gonna if we were comparing this to Switzerland and South Africa and say which one's prettier, like Switzerland wins that competition in my mind. But there is something really special about South Africa. You're there on the South Atlantic, at least where we were in Cape Town. You're looking out the window at the South Atlantic Ocean, and very nearby is a working harbor. And around that working harbor, they've built this really cool entertainment venue of restaurants and shops and bars and places to have fun. And so you're looking at the Atlantic and this beautiful white sand coastline. Then you've got this cool working harbor, and the coastline then continues. But a quarter mile off the coastline, mountains shoot up out of the ground. So you got Table Mountain there, and it's just
Lion's Head.
You just kind of look out at the scenery and go, this place exists. Like the beautiful beach, the harbor, the beautiful mountain in the background, pretty special place. And as a U.S. citizen carrying our currency in our pocket, it goes a long way there.
I bet.
So we've had some very nice meals at restaurants, and just walked out going, how did all of that only cost us $100 for 5 people to eat like kings?
Yeah.
So your money goes along. Yeah, money goes a long way in this very beautiful, special place.
It pains me to say this. I'm not proud to say this, but I do want to reflect upon the kindness of the South African people and of the 40-some countries represented there. Unfortunately, the biggest jerk I ran into all week was from the U.S. And, I did say to that guy, hey, man.
Are you talking about me?
Sorry, second biggest. Don't be the ugly American. And, I want to remind people, when you travel abroad, you're representing your country. Not only when people come visit you are you representing your country, but when you travel abroad, you are representing the place that you grew up in, that you call home. Respect that. Because, it's a privilege to be there. And not that many people were there this year. There were 600 of us that were fortunate enough to be there because of COVID. That's all they would let in. It was 300 teams max. So, to be able to do these things is a privilege. To be able to sit and talk about it's a privilege. But, if you go to Switzerland or you go to BC Bike Race, make sure you represent your birthplace proudly and well.
I agree. Well, hey, thank you guys for coming on and telling your story. I felt like I had to do nothing. I just was here.
We could talk about this forever.
I know.
The other thing we could talk about forever.
I think the only thing The
Just
only
got
thing is,
cut today.
I need to get some heat in the van. You can feel the drop.
I'm good, man. I got my nice
I know.
Road ID Swiss Epic hoodie on, so I'm feeling nice and warm. And
Here's another thing. You're rarely going to catch James without something related to one of the epic races.
That's true.
On his
That's
body.
true.
So right now you.
or Road ID.
Yeah, very true. I've never seen him without anything like that.
Yeah. You know, it's not. The Ironman community I think is interesting. These people that get. This is a group of people that get very, very passionate about the events that they do, and they should. It's an amazing thing. You never catch an Ironman athlete without something Ironman related on them, and
Yeah.
it might be a calf tattoo.
Yeah.
So James represents well this community, this epic series, and what it means.
Well, I think this is a multiple day event. The MDOT guys they're doing one day, and I don't want to take anything away from it because I'm gonna be an MDOT person next year myself. But it's a special community, and I can't wait for Justin to be part of it in some way, form, or fashion. We've been talking about it for 2 years, and now that he's moved away and he has better trails to ride on year round, I don't think he has any excuse, Ed. And you know how great we are at pulling people along on these adventures. Look how many people we've added to the pot. I don't think the kid has any excuse.
Seems like the excuses are running out.
All right. I'll keep it on the. It'll be in my mind. I do need to get my endurance up for sure. So.
Well, it sounds like you have an opportunity there.
Yeah. Well, Ed, thanks for telling me about Road ID. I never knew about the backstory of it, so I appreciate that. And then thank you guys for both coming on and tell us your racing stories. I appreciate it greatly, and I would love to have you back on sometime.
Yeah.
Well, don't go out there, guys. Go out there. Just do it. Go out there and make life happen. Don't wait for it to happen. Hopefully in about a year and a half, we'll have Ed here as an epic legend as well. And you got to put the work in. Nothing in life worthwhile is easy, but we talk about being uncommon amongst uncommon. There are a lot of people out there doing this, and they started somewhere. Ed started 31 pounds heavier. I started 30 pounds heavier. Come out. Just give it a shot.
Yeah.
Nothing to lose.
James likes to say something that I've adopted, that 6 billion people wake up every day. And so he'll usually bring this up when we're at the, just climbed a big mountain bike climb somewhere, and go 6 billion people woke up today. How many of them were able to do this? I think that's a great lens to look at this kind of stuff through, because it is fairly uncommon for people to do, to get on their mountain bike regularly, or to get on the road bike regularly, or to just get out and be active regularly. It's fairly uncommon, and it's great for you. And on the mountain bike side, it's everything I hoped it would be, and more. So when I always, as a roadie, I always thought about getting a mountain bike and making that part of my routine. And I always thought about it in the sense, and connected it to when I was a kid and riding that Diamondback Silver Streak in the woods, and how much fun that was to build jumps and trails in the woods behind our buddy's house. And now I'm 44 years old, and I feel like a kid again. Like, it's riding mountain bikes is so much fun, getting out in the woods and doing things that you didn't know you could do.
Yeah. Mountain bikes are fun.
And I'm 47. How old are you?
I just turned 40.
Okay. I'm faster at 47 than I was at 40. You can be too.
Yeah. We'll end there. So thank you guys, and thanks everybody for listening. I truly appreciate it. See ya. See ya. See ya. See ya. See ya. See ya.